What's up, yo? Welcome to the Young Legends podcast, where we teach you the cheat codes to the game of life. I'm your host, Caption, aka Caption Red, and Happy New Year to you. 2021 is behind us. 2022 is on the horizon. I know that this isn't the year that we want coming up, but here's the thing about life. You always have to stay positive. You always have to reimagine how life can be, readjust. And if you learn to do those things, if you learn to roll with the punches, you are going to have a good life. Now, this episode is all about celebrating all the great guests with the great information that they shared during 2021. There's a ton of awesome, life-changing, insightful information in this episode, and I picked the very best parts of the interviews that I did this past year. So without further ado, let's get started. Here's a couple snippets from my interview with four-time Olympian and cancer survivor Chaunte Lowe. Shout out to Chaunte Lowe because she's lifting spirits high, an inspiration to our nation with unstoppable drive. She left up in our hearts by doing what is hard, high jumping throughout life, always raising the bar with records in her name by pushing through the pain. She's been a champion, my friends, 4 times an Olympian, and she never stops winning. But wait for the second act, this is just the beginning. A champion of education, a conqueror of cancer, and a voice you need to hear. She's a Jeopardy answer, a legend that's spreading love and hope around the globe. I have 4 words for you. Who is Chaunte Lowe?
Yes. That was awesome.
Thank you. You know what? That's actually my first time doing that. You get the VIP treatment because I was like, you know what? I just can't do a regular intro to Miss Chaunte Lowe. So thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. How are you?
I am doing good. My cheeks are hurting because that was so good. I'm smiling so hard. That was awesome.
Thank you. I try. But I want to talk about something that I've thought about a lot because of just my understanding of what happens in the Olympics and things not being as maybe rosy as they're displayed on TV. So when you were competing and you had the inkling that some of these other women were doping, that were on the podium when you should have been, and it turned out that was the case. How did you deal with your deep feelings of injustice that they're winning, you're not, because they're cheating and you're doing the right thing? Because that's really hard, right? I mean, that's just, it would just aggravate me so much if I were in your shoes. But you kept going, and kudos to you. But can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's a real thing that a lot of people experience in life.
Yeah. So I think that for me, it started a while back. In 2004, when I made my first Olympic team, it was when the whole Balco drug scandal was going on. I'm competing for my first time in the Olympics, and I'm on a train in Athens, just riding through the city, trying to experience being overseas for the first time. And I'm wearing my USA uniform, and people are like, "Oh, you drug cheat." And I'm like, "Wow, I don't know what you're talking about." And it hurt. But I had to become aware and open my eyes that there was a group of people who were trying to defraud other athletes by cheating and getting an advantage. But the great thing about that time period was that they were actually starting to catch these athletes. It wasn't that it was just beginning to happen. It's that they were starting to catch the athletes. And so when I go back to school and I'm talking to my coach, I'm like, "Hey, people are cheating. What are we going to do about this? How are we going to make sure it's fair?" And he gave me one of the best lessons that I would have in my entire life. He was like, "You make the assumption that they're not cheating. And the reason why you make that assumption is because if you, in the back of your mind, believe that they're cheating and that they have an advantage over you, you're not going to train to beat them. You're going to always think that you're supposed to be just below them because you think that they have an advantage that you don't have." And when I realized that, I started training as though everyone was clean, and I did begin to beat them. There's several of the people that did beat me at the Olympic Games, but I had beat several times before. Sadly, I didn't perform as to the best of my ability that I wanted to at the games, but I knew that there's something that could be wrong. But when I stepped on that field and I decided to compete with those people, I believed that they were clean. And that's what I needed to do to cope, to be able to compete. I believe that everything that happens in the dark will eventually come to the light. And so what really needed to be exercised was perseverance and patience. And even though it took 9 years, it eventually came out. And it took 9 years of me consistently being clean, but it made me a better athlete because I had to beat athletes that weren't being fair. And it made me a better person. So instead of looking at it as some negative injustice, I think of it as like, wow, you guys were the best training motivation that a girl could have, because I was training to beat you, even though you weren't clean, but I was doing it clean. So it pulled me to be a better athlete. And that's kind of the mindset because your mental health can deteriorate if you're thinking about being under an injustice for so long. So I would rather have my mental sanity and get better than try to fix the wrong at the time, because I believe that the system eventually would weed some of those things out.
And you just talked about something about knowing yourself, right? And that kind of leads me into another question where, you beat breast cancer, and there's more to it than just that. But the story, from what I understand, is you were doing a self-exam, you felt a lump, you suspected it might be breast cancer, but you were told that you're too young and too healthy for that to happen.
Yep.
So what advice do you have? It's a two-part question. What would you tell young people about advocating for themselves and also listening to their own body, which I think you touched on a little bit, but
Yeah. So I think that, you hear advocate for yourself and it sounds like an amazing, empowering thing to do. But if you don't know the steps or what it actually means, you don't know how to make it a powerful resource for yourself. And advocating for yourself is pushing for what you want medically, pushing for the testing that you want, pushing for the diagnosis that you may think that you need. If you are not satisfied, you keep pushing until you are. And, sometimes you have to be more strategic with it. You have to do the research and say, well, what can I say to get this diagnostic testing? And in my case, what I've learned is that if there's a breast exam or some type of diagnostic test that you want that they will not give you, you say, please make a note of it in my record that you are refusing to give me this test that I'm requesting. 9 times out of 10, they will give you that test, because if you end up having that ailment that they're refusing to test you for, they'll be liable.
Right.
And so that's what I've learned through research. And when it comes to young professionals, you have to be the one. And sometimes you have to advocate even against the insurance company. If they don't want to cover something, find a way to get it medically necessary. And sometimes that may mean having to pay for it out of pocket and coming back and getting it paid for after, but it's important to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And keeping them accountable is key, right? Because that's what gets people to do something.
Absolutely. And then what was the second? There was a second part of your question.
Listening to your own body. Yeah.
Yes. Our bodies are made miraculously. I'm on the mathematics side. I'm not on the scientific side, but whenever you're not feeling well, you might get a tickle in your throat, a tickle in your nose. You feel it, maybe if you're having night sweats at night or just something different and off. Even if it's something small, it could be your body sending alarm signals that you want to pay attention to it. And I think that, for me, looking back, my little alarms were going off, but I didn't know what to look for. And I think that you can't be scripted and knowledgeable in every single alarm that you should look for. But the place that you could start is knowing what your normal is, knowing that, okay, if I run a mile, I'm probably going to breathe hard for 10 minutes, but then I'll feel fine. But maybe one day you run a mile and you're breathing hard for an hour and then you have chest pains at night. Like something like that, you have to be able to know your body. For women, you do the self breast examinations and you need to know the feel, the look, the shape of your own body. And even for men, the same thing. Men can get breast cancer. You need to know the pigmentation, the shape, the feel, because you're going to be your first line of defense. The doctor's not going to come to your house and say, hey, you sweat all night last night. What's going on with that? That you're going to be the person that's going to bring that to a professional's attention. So you are your first line of defense. And it's been widely known that most things that we catch early, we have more options of treatment. The longer you let it go, the fear of going to the doctor or the fear of a bad diagnosis is more likely going to put you in a worse off situation than if you would have just went in the first place.
Here's a couple snippets from my interview with Darryl James, bass player for the Strumbellas and solo artist at Close Kicks. You know, as I did my research on y'all and, you know, your, I guess, 7-8 year journey before you really took off, you have your own journey, which I was like, what? Like you started playing bass when you were 30? Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. I was not involved in music as a child. Like I obviously listened to it actively and my mom was a big listener. So, you know, I always loved the Beatles and, you know, the oldies, always engaged throughout my life, had a hip hop era. But I didn't pick up a guitar until 19, 20 years old. Kind of started to learn some campfire songs and covers. And then it got fun kind of just jamming with friends and trying to solo or something. And that's kind of where I was friends with Simon's brother, Todd. He's my age. I'm a few years older than Simon. And you know, Simon moved. That was my connection to Simon. Simon moved to the city. He started coming over for dinner. We started jamming. And when he wanted to form the band and put the ad out to Craigslist, it was like, oh, I'd love to be part of this. You know, I'd love to be part of a band. Not really thinking we would go anywhere. And I initially started playing ukulele in the band. And then there was no bass player, and I was like, well, I'm sure I can figure it out. Like I have the work ethic to do it, and that's it. And then they put me in place, and away we went. So that is the story. I was 30 years old. The Strumbellas, my first band at 30, and first time playing bass. And so it really proves, you know, if you put your mind to something and work hard, anything's possible. I did not expect at this stage of my life to be a full-time musician and artist.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like one of the most inspiring things I've heard in a very long time.
I really, the takeaway is, you know, I think a lot of people have this perception that you can do everything perfectly and that you're going to, you know, sometimes go through life with no errors. And I think that's the wrong attitude. I think it's the mistakes that give you humbleness, and then the mistakes that allow you to grow and not make the mistake again and to get to the next level. So don't be ignorant of your mistakes, and don't be ignorant if someone calls you out on your mistakes, because they might be for a reason, and it's good to listen and good to learn from those, because it really is like, you know, even with the songwriting world, like, you know, a lot of the advice I get is don't think you're going to write, you know, a hit song in 10 songs or 20 songs. Think about it in 300 songs. You have to make those mistakes. You have to get that feedback. You have to kind of get the bad news. The melodies aren't good enough. The lyrics aren't strong enough. These things aren't to the speed that you have to get that to know that, hey, okay, I can make improvements, and I am going to take the necessary steps, and I'm going to get more training, or I'm going to continue to write, or I'm going to continue to push myself to get to that level. So yeah, you just can't, you know, mistakes happen, and they always do. I still every day do things that, you know, I'm like, I have to apologize sometimes to people and be like, hey, I was absolutely wrong on that, and you were right. It is going to happen, but be humble around it, admit your mistakes, and learn from them.
You know what? And I love that I'm hearing from a rock star that you have to be humble and apologize sometimes. That's fantastic.
Obviously, as you grow up and you're experiencing, you know, love and opportunity and all of these emotions that you go through, I think it's just important to, if you really want to follow your dreams and your goals and your vision, is, as I mentioned throughout, just to stay humble, to work hard, to listen to others, and to take their advice. And if you can do those 3 or 4 little things, really anything's possible. It really, some people think a lot of the success and the star, like rock star, it happens overnight. And I know there's like a small fraction of people that happens to, whether it be through social media or you win the lottery or whatever. But the more and more people I speak to, the more people that have gotten to that level, it's all through hard work. It's all through being humble. It's all through being kind. It's all through listening. I've met some of the biggest stars in the world, and they are so kind, so humble, so thoughtful. And that really like helped me. As I saw, I was like, oh man, like these people are way bigger than I am. I'm starstruck to see them, and they were just like the nicest, kindest, thoughtful, asked me questions about my life, my family, my kids. And you're like, whoa, geez, like this is incredible. So, as far as you get, as far as you go, like those fundamentals always stay the same, and always keep that in the forefront as you work through love and work and business and following your dreams. You got to follow that.
Here's a couple of knowledge bombs from my interview with YouTubers Phillip and Julia Olsen at 2 Cents PBS.
So it doesn't take a lot of math. What being good at money really takes is a good load of self-awareness. Being able to understand how and why you do the things you do, that is going to give you a ton of financial power in the long term, because we're emotional beings. We make money. There's no such thing as a logical money decision. There isn't. Emotions are always in the picture, because we're not computers, right? We're human beings. That's how we're made. And so if we can come to terms with how we feel, what we're trying to get when we spend our money in this way or that way, digging into that story and asking yourself tougher questions of like, well, why did I really do this? Or why did I buy this? Why did I feel like I needed this? Why, until you get down to the nut of it. That is super, super powerful information, even more powerful than like, should I put money into a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA? Like that's really where your power is going to be found.
Yeah, that's awesome. What is it? Phil, did you want to add anything to that?
That was great. Nothing to add.
I love it. Fantastic. Good stuff. So y'all are a married couple, which I think is fantastic that y'all are, working together on mission together. You have a child together. Y'all got married at the age of 20, which is,
Yes. We did.
It's young. It's not,
It is.
Yes. I mean, it worked out for us, but it's not necessarily something I would recommend for most people. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's worked out really well. And so I just want to tap into your minds about like, what is the advice that you give, whether it's 20-year-olds or people younger or even older, about finding a life partner? Because it looks like both of y'all just struck gold.
It's true. I mean, even out like tomorrow, we'll be married for 14 years. So
tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow's our 14-year anniversary. And even now, we really do feel just incredibly lucky. But that's not to say we haven't put in a ton of work to make this work, because over such a long period of time, who I am now at 34 is very different than who I was at 20. Same thing with Phillip. We have become different people, and that can be very stressful, going through all sorts of changes. And I'm sure we have many, many changes ahead of us. But, I try not to dispense too much relationship advice, because I feel like the minute you try and put yourself on a pedestal as like some relationship expert, like it all comes crashing down. But I will say, if I can give 2 pieces of advice for people who are trying to see like, what am I really looking for in a life partner that can really make it stick, right? I think for me, something I found in Phillip that I thankfully was super blessed to also see in my dad when I was growing up is a deep sense of integrity. Just this feeling of like, this guy who I'm going to be with, he's just going to do the right thing 9 times out of 10. Like and even if he doesn't do the right thing, he's going to realize it and like come around, right? Like nobody's perfect, but he's just driven by this really deep inner sense of integrity. And that is something you can work with long-term. And that has not changed, right, in him at all. And that is something I just saw. I said, okay, if I'm going to hitch my wagon to somebody for the long term, they better have a deep sense of integrity about themselves and how they treat the people around them. And that is like a bedrock foundation that you can build on. And then secondly is you need to find somebody who's willing to put in work with you, because relationships are work. Like you fly high on those, connection butterfly vibes. Those last you like a year and a half, 2, if you're lucky, right? And then it gets hard and you're trying to communicate things and you're not doing it very well. And why can't they just understand you? Like, the closer you get to somebody, the more and more flaws you see. It's just inevitable. And so finding somebody who's willing to go to therapy with you, willing to come back and apologize and say, hey, I did wrong. Here's what happened. I'm sorry. Like somebody who can be humble and be willing to take the hit when it's theirs to take. Those are like, I don't know how people can create a solid life partnership if those 2 things aren't in place.
Yeah, one of the smartest in hindsight things we did very early in our relationship is we started going to couples therapy very early into our marriage. And we've been going for like 10 years or 11 years now. We've been going for a super long time. We started going, as many couples do, I think, when there's difficulty and there's things you can't fix and you're feeling like you're in crisis. But then we just kept going. We actually had some friends who said, if I could go see this counselor every day, I would. And I was just scratching my head and saying, why would you do that? Because I always thought of therapy or counseling as like, it's like the emergency room. You only go there if things are, you're cheating on your spouse or, there's just absolute crisis. And we've really come to see it as preventative maintenance. It's just, and it's honestly somewhat enjoyable. It's like getting a massage, like you're having someone really listen to you and who helps you hear the other person and the other person hear you in ways you can't do on your own very well. I think that's probably the best investment we've made in our relationship over our years was having that and keeping that.
Yeah. And I would say these 2 things, like kind of the integrity piece and the work piece, that is true for any life partner you have. Your romantic partner is not the only life partner you'll have. I have 2 best friends, and they, the more I think about it, they're the same way, like willing to put in the work, have deep integrity, like the people who really support your whole life. Those are the types of people that you want to do your best to attract and maintain.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you read my mind, because that was one of my other questions is how do you pick a good friend? So
just as important. I mean, so much of our culture is focused on like getting a romantic partner. And I mean, obviously it's wonderful when you can and do find that, but your romantic partner can't and shouldn't be everything to you in your whole life. They can't. It's way too much pressure to put on one person. So like, it's super important that you have deep, abiding friendships and that you cultivate those over time, because it takes a village to raise a person. And that's true with a kid. And it's true still kind of like in your adulthood, you need a group of people to support you.
As you reference kids, I wanted to make sure to get this in here, because you mentioned something in an interview that said the danger of success theater. And could y'all speak to that? Because that is a real thing in today's society, and it's everywhere.
Oh gosh, it's so true. I mean, success theater is, I will say.
Can you define what that means?
Yes.
Oh, well, sure. I guess Well, the way, when I think about it, it's like, it's a front. I mean, there's a term for it. I mean, you're fronting, right? Like you put up this, you take energy to display a image of yourself out in the world through how you dress, what you post about, where you go, all of that would lead someone to infer that you have, I would say, more money and more peace than you do. I think that's kind of what we mean by success theater. And I'll say that's been around for as long as humans have been around. Like this is not anything new. We want to project a feeling of power and security so we don't get picked on. Right? That's like so deep in our reptilian brain. But now what's dangerous, I think, and so much more dangerous, is that we now have so many easy avenues to project this, of course, through things like social media, right? It only takes a free click of a button to help create a fantasy, right? Something that's not really real. And what it does is it can really mess with our perception of where we are in relation to everyone else. And when you feel behind, quote unquote, based on pictures you see on an app, and that makes you feel behind, that can lead to stress and burnout and overspending and so many things. And so it's a danger, and I really worry about it, especially for younger kids now who have access to things that I just didn't have access to back then. It would have been, I mean, it's already hard enough, and it's, I think, going to be made much harder to try and live your life in such a way where you kind of have some blinders on, where it's like, I'm running my race. I don't know what anyone else's balance sheet really looks like. Because I can tell you, as someone who looks at the real numbers behind people's lives, you have no idea what's going on, what that car actually cost them, or the fact that, you just don't know, right? And so far better to just say, I don't know, and I don't need to know. It doesn't matter. You got to make choices for your own journey that are in your own self-interest, and try as much as you can to tame your FOMO, because those images that other people projecting 9.5 times out of 10 aren't really telling you the truth.
Yeah, that's something we can definitely speak to as financial planners, that not everybody gets to see. Is that big house and that BMW and the Land Rover are almost always hiding something or compensating for the fact that this person is up to their eyeballs in debt, or they have a failing business, or they failed to save. And the image of wealth is not wealth. It's so easy to fall for that. But we look under the hood, and the wealthy people don't tend to show it off as much, because it just makes you a target. It's actually, I think, generally not a great thing to be bragging about how much wealth you have, because people will come for you. So you kind of want to keep it on the DL and not make a big deal about it. People make a big deal out are probably just trying to show off or
sell something.
Yeah, they're usually selling you something most of the time.
Here's some great information about helping you with your mental health from mindfulness and well-being expert Angela Buttimer. So when it comes to something that you said in one of your videos, I really liked it, and I love the phrase of our thoughts. And you said, don't believe everything you think. And just to observe your thoughts and not internalize them. How do you do that? Because I kind of, to some degree, have done studying on this, but I'm by no means an expert. So how could you ask people to, or help people to step outside themselves and actually do that?
Well, I'll tell you, meditation goes a long way in this, because the training of meditation is to begin to observe the self, to not be fused with your thoughts or your emotions, and recognize that you're not your thoughts, you're not your emotions. They are energies just passing through. And meditation really helps train the brain to become an observer, so that you stay more in the driver's seat, more in control of various thoughts and emotions that are going to come through. They are fluctuations emotions and consciousness, and that's a part of our humanity. But, to be the master of our thoughts and emotions instead of letting them master us is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say to someone who's never done meditation, just to kind of help them get the ball rolling? Because meditation is, I'm going to admit, I try to do it every day. Most days I do. There are days that I miss. But when I first started meditating, it felt so intimidating because, so yeah. What would you say to someone who doesn't quite practice and needs to get started?
So I would say start small, right? Consistency is key, and a little bit goes a long way. So set yourself up for success by setting aside some time, preferably in the morning, to practice this. And, maybe you start off with 3 or 5 minutes of just following the breath and quieting the mind. And there's lots of wonderful apps out there. There's lots of great YouTube videos. There's a million ways to meditate. But I personally know that the most of the research that's out there is based on mindfulness meditation. And so if you can find a good mindfulness meditation to guide you through those 3 minutes, that can be very, very helpful. Once you have those 3 minutes down for, a week or two, then bump it up to 5 minutes. And eventually I would encourage people to get out there to about 15 or 20 minutes every morning. That positive morning ritual really sets people up for success. The most successful people in the world have a positive morning ritual.
Right. So you're saying it's definitely worth the sleep that you're
Yes.
gonna miss.
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, you think about 3 minutes or 5 minutes, you have time to do that. And one of the things you can do, there's a research coming out of Stanford by Dr. B.J. Fogg, who talks about tiny habits. You could be doing your 3-minute, 5-minute meditation while your coffee is brewing.
Sure.
Right? Just sit down and pair it with something that you're already doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been doing some of it on my drive, so eyes open, of course. So.
I was gonna say, wait, what now? that's dangerous. I can't be a party to that.
Yeah, no. I just let I let my inner spirit guide the wheel. No, I'm just kidding.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, I do encourage you to be able to sit down somewhere in your home, and it's best if you can do it same place, same time, and if you can ritualize your meditation, like lighting a candle or some incense, that kind of thing can really help you get grounded in the practice.
Right, absolutely. And in regards to meditation is a great thing to help you step outside of yourself and observe your thoughts. But like one of the things that I was kind of wondering in this whole conversation of loving yourself is this whole idea of, yes, self-acceptance is important, but self-improvement is also very important.
Agree.
And so how do you balance that? Because it kind of comes off as like, if you love yourself, you're just accepting yourself. But then if you accept yourself, you're not improving yourself. And like, we all need to improve and we all could be doing better. And so like, that's all.
Well, it's a great question. I love the question. And I get approached with that question a lot by clients. And so I think self-love is misunderstood. People mistake it for resignation. And that's really not the path of human potential, which I'm so passionate about, and I think you are too. But what we know from the research is that criticism actually sabotages forward movement. So to practice that, I love myself exactly as I am, and I'm eager for more. You can actually hold both. They can coexist. I love myself exactly as I am, and more I am improving. So it's really both and. But that critical voice that a lot of us have been conditioned, like no pain, no gain, that actually sabotages your success. It does not help.
Now, in regards to your TED Talk, which I really enjoyed, You had mentioned that you dealt with depression in high school. And knowing what you know now, what would you have gone and told, younger Angela on how to deal with it, and how did you deal with it and kind of come out of that?
I don't know that I could have told her anything at a really young age. I think I came by it honestly through genetics. And there were some things in my environment that contributed to the depression as well. Luckily for me, I learned to meditate when I was 15. And I believe that really saved me. And it really helped me relate to my depression in a way where I could observe the depression, but not buy into it as truth. And so I was able to really dissociate from the depression, actually, and see that it was fleeting if I would allow it to be fleeting. Because a lot of times what we do is we think our emotions rather than feel our emotions. And when we think our emotions, we get stuck. We get stuck in depressive, anxious, stressful patterns. And so that meditation at 15, and I've been committed to it ever since, really, really was helpful.
Absolutely. And can you explain the difference between thinking and feeling the emotions as far as that goes?
Yeah, so a lot of times we'll have an emotion and we'll immediately pop up into the thoughts and try to explain the emotion, rationalize it, defend it, figure it out so that we can try to control it. And that can leave us stuck in a negative emotion for days. Feeling the emotion is actually checking in and saying, oh, what is this? Okay, it's fear. I'm feeling fear. Where is it in my body? Acknowledging where you're holding that fear in your body, breathing into it and allowing yourself to feel it versus think it, not running a storyline on the fear, just feeling the fear, bringing compassion to yourself and the fear as you're having it. And what we know is that emotions only last for seconds, and they will morph into something else if we will feel it rather than think it.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. I'm going to have to start practicing more of that too as well. So
it's so helpful. Otherwise, these emotions will run us, right? And then we are completely out of control and we don't feel well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Here's some great life info from director and filmmaker Michael Addis.
Here's the thing. If you have a dream and you want to be like a singer or something, and somebody gives you any piece of advice that helps you or gets you to move forward and gets you to work a little harder or to be a little bit better, great. If they tell you something that's a little painful, but it pushes you to be better, great. If you take that advice or take that criticism and then it stops you, well, that's on you. You got to figure a way to make sure that it doesn't, right? And so you could get all the input you want, but it can be tough, but your job is just to keep on going and just keep on getting better. And I was just listening to Clubhouse, Robert Greene, brilliant writer, did the 48 Laws of Power. And somebody had told him early in his career, it's like, you really suck. Your writing really sucks. And it hurt for a while, but he used it to get better and work a little harder. And that's the key. That's why Robert Greene is successful, because he did that. And if you do let the criticism take you down, it's just a mistake. So the failure of that first movie, I had to go through like Est and stuff to kind of deal with it. But which is another interesting story, because the one thing I got, which I could save you guys a lot of time, but if you ever have a big failure like that, one way to look at it is, if you're going to be a filmmaker or you're going to make TV or any endeavor you do, if you have a big, like, let's say you're going to be an entrepreneur and your business fails. Well, an entrepreneur isn't defined as one business. An entrepreneur probably has lots of businesses over the course of his lifetime. And so if I was going to be a filmmaker and I didn't get one movie made, well, that's not a filmmaker. I have 50 movies to make in my lifetime. And if I fail at the first one, I just go to the next one. Like, you have to start looking at that scale. You have to start going, it's not about one failure. It's about here's my oeuvre, here's my body of work, and just go to the next one.
Here's some great information on success by stand-up comedian Neel Nanda.
That mentality of like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I mean, I've taken so many shots and missed. You know, I submitted for a special for multiple networks, multiple times, multiple years in a row. And I thought that was the only option. But one thing that's really unique and really, really cool about the time we live in is with social media, you can do everything yourself. You can film your own special. You can put it out there. You can do your own podcast. You can film it. You can edit clips. You can put out your own stand-up. I have over 2 hours of material online right now. And you can build your own following without having to beg a network to do 5 minutes on their show or to do a half-hour special on their network. It's a really unique time where you have to roll with those punches and figure out how to do it yourself. We really live in a generation and a time where you can do pretty much anything you want yourself. You can't get on late night. Guess what? You could make your own late night show, put it on YouTube.
Sure.
You can't get on, you can get a Netflix half hour or an hour. Film your hour, put it on YouTube, put it wherever you want, put it on Facebook, put it on Instagram, put it everywhere.
Here's some amazing information on work and life by best-selling author of Designing Your Life and co-founder of the Stanford School of Design, Dave Evans.
It is the single most important tool we teach. It's the far and away single most powerful tool. We had a student named Shu Chao. 3 years after graduation, she comes back, she goes, "Hey, I'm on campus. Can we get together, have a coffee or have a lunch?" I go, "Yeah, I'd love to see you." And she walks up to the table on the patio in front of the student union, and she sits down, and the first thing she goes is, "You have to tell them. You have to tell them." She's totally cranked up, and I kind of go, "Oh, okay, I'll tell them." "Tell them what?" She goes, "It's true. It's true." I go, "Okay, what? What's true?" And she goes, "The thing about talking to people, it's really important, And I went, "Yeah, I know. I'm so glad you can confirm that for me." So the information interview, but the critical thing about the information interview or the life design prototype conversation is that it is the narrative. You're getting the story. It is not a transactional conversation. You're not asking for money. You're not asking for a job. Because as soon as you make this a transaction where the person you're talking to thinks you want something from them, particularly if they think what you want is a job, then boom, you're now first of all, 9 times out of 10, that person doesn't have what they think you want. I can't give you a job. If I thought this morning what you wanted from me was a job, sorry, we have no openings. We're done. So first thing is 9 times out of 10, you're already over before you start. And then even if they do have what you think you want, you want money from them, or you want a job from them, you want a reference from them, they have it to give. Now I have to make a judgment as to whether or not you're worthy of it. Sure. So the brain you're getting in that person is a judging brain. Yes, no, yes, no. Do I really want to refer, Caption Read to my friend or not? Is he cool enough? You don't want a judging brain to talk to. That's a very critical mindset. Probably leaning toward rejection. So it's like, "Hey, you're a really interesting person. Tell me your story. You and I both think you're fascinating. We have a common interest in you're the fascinating person. Why don't we talk about how fascinating you are? Would that work for you?" And most people kind of go, "Sure. My favorite topic is me and what I'm doing. Let's talk about me." I mean, I wouldn't say it quite that obviously, though pretty close, frankly. It works surprisingly well. So we'll leave this now and go back to the interview you had in mind. But information interviewing or life design prototype conversations are crucially important, and it's all about the story, not the transaction. And to get one, the crucial thing you need to bring to the table is authentic curiosity. Those things you want to hear about, those stories you're looking for, you actually have to want to hear them. You can't fake it. So if you aren't really curious about somebody, don't talk to them. Wait until you can generate some curiosity. Like, "No, I'd really love to hear Caption Read's story." If that's not true, don't bother the man. Now, happy is a little different word. The positive psychology world goes after that. Most people, including scientists, agree pursuing happiness for its own sake doesn't work. Happiness is the byproduct of living the coherent life. The meaning, I'm living life in a meaningful way to me. I'm making a contribution, or I'm living out my values. I decide what we call the coherent life, or who I am, what I believe in, and what I'm doing align. So I'm kind of making sense of myself in the world. That sense making is a prerequisite to happiness. It's very hard to be happy if your life doesn't make sense. So we start there, and then you lean into it. And then again, things like the Good Time Journal and paying attention, in fact, the title of the conclusion chapter is Permission to be Happy. And permission to be happy includes, look, you do have some agency over your life. You can make some of these design changes. We wrote the second book, by the way, called Designing Your Work Life, about a lot of little tiny small moves, practical moves you can make right where you already are. We say don't resign, redesign before you jump out the window and get a new job. More people quit in the last 3 months than in modern history. We're going through the great resignation or the big quit right now because people have had it. Well, some of those people probably should be doing exactly that. We got a chapter on how to quit. But also, a lot of people are probably quitting who could get a better job right where they are if they knew how to do that by making small moves. And so, good enough for now is something we want to encourage people to allow themselves to be happy with. It's never going to be perfect. Okay. And I don't want you to, I'm not saying put up with crap, but I am saying, can you make it a little better? Here's some ideas for making it a little better. And if you made it a little better, is that good enough for now? Next month we'll try something else. So we on the happy thing, if you start getting your hands around the moves you can make. I mean, some people listening to this are contemplating a really big dramatic move, completely changing their lives and moving across the country and getting a new degree and changing industries. And some are just like, I just like it to be a little bit better. And so we really do want to give people permission to be happy. None of us ever gets done, and none of us ever gets perfect. But am I growing proactively forward? And all our books are about are a couple of tools that might be helpful for you to make a couple of moves to make things a little better.
Can you hear that okay?
Yep.
All right. Yo, check. Words that I'm repping. Yo, it's Dave Evans. Came through and he's getting a whole bunch of people on their path, acting and coming through rapping. I'm talking about dysfunctional police all the time. I keep it on the grind. That's what I gotta do. Yo, I'm just asking, what's my passion? You might have a lot, you might not have one. And that's what I say, you gotta just have fun. Good time journals, what you gotta write down. And that's what I say, you gotta do it right now. Understand you are just engaged, come through. And yo, you gotta enjoy the things in your life, be in a flow state. And that's what I say, yo, I just make design thinking. You gotta prototype, you gotta try things and be curious. Look under the rock and do it non-stop. You gotta understand, you got a whole bunch of questions you gotta ask for the people that know that are in the situation you want to go. Basically what I'm saying is you got to understand how you got elements of your life. You got to create it just by trying. There's no failure, you just gotta keep learning all the time. And that's how I rhyme, spit a freestyle. Yo, it's just amazing. Use your imagination and come straight through. Have an interview, maybe 2, maybe 50, maybe 75. And that's how you gon' come through and just arrive. I'm talking about Dave Evans is coming with a book, and it's really off the hook. Up on October 19th, we know it's about to drop, and that's how it goes. I spit a freestyle, and that's how I do. Come through, and we're here to make moves, spit off the top, and that's how I go. Designing your life up in the flow.
Oh man, you're killing me. That's great.
Very
impressed.
And last but not least, I want to end with this super inspirational message from comic book artist Irene Strychalski.
I think a problem that a lot of people suffer from in especially the modern world is because we're trained to kind of just produce and do certain things. Like you go to work, it's about how much money you make. And it's, I think people are afraid to imagine that they could be more. Like maybe the person who was doing data entry once really wanted to be a pilot or something, but they're afraid of that imagination. They've been told that that's impossible. They've been doing this job and it's so stable. They've been doing it for 15 years now, so they don't want to like take the risk. I'm not saying like it's okay to, you know, like take calculated risks or think things through. I'm not saying don't think things through, or like it's always taking a risk is always a good idea, because it's not. But I think people are too afraid to even imagine. And with artists, I see a lot of people who this ties back to self-doubt. Artists suffer from a lot of self-doubt in general, and a lot of people they want to create their own project. They want so bad to have their own comic, or they want so bad to have their own show, but they're just so afraid to put it out there, or they're so anxious that they can't even like start drawing the first page. And I think people have to be less afraid of their imagination, because that's kind of beaten out of us as we grow up. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think we need that to be happy.
All right, so that's a wrap for 2021. I hope you got as much from those snippets as I did, and I highly recommend each one of those episodes in their entirety. I'll make sure to link each episode in the show notes. Here's to you having an amazing 2022, and here's to your success in all things. All right, so that's all I got for now. Until next time, peace!